Great. I'll bring Kaito, Miku, and Mako by and we'll see what we can get. Deal? If I'm wrong, I'll buy you dinner.
I couldn't believe I had agreed to this. Yohio is my best friend, and we often talked about our cases, leaving out the finer details so as to protect our patients. But last week, I'd had a little too much to drink, and Yohio knew exactly what to say to get the information he wanted out of me. Part of me was angry with him for not stopping me before I'd said too much. Part of me was angry with myself for breaking patient confidentiality like that. But another part of me was excited. The results I'd gotten from putting Haku, Rin, and Len in the same room together were astounding. I had never expected to get such a clear picture of the same story from two separate people who had never met before. I don't quite know how Yohio got his patient's parents to agree to this. I had only convinced the twins' mother to agree to this session with Haku by convincing her that she and Len shared a similar trauma and might be able to help each other. This was completely different, however. Yohio and I didn't work at the same office, and the 3 teenagers he was bringing today were not my patients. In the end, I decided not to tell the twins' mother about Yohio or what we were planning. My office was far too small for a group this large, and my receptionist was far too nosy to keep anything about this to herself. So, what I had decided to tell their mother was that Rin and Len needed some time away from the pressures of society to process what had happened. Their mother was either too fixated on her own grief to really understand, or she simply didn't care anymore. With a little convincing, I managed to get her to agree to allow me to take the twins to a 24-hour care center for children and teens struggling with their mental health. This specific facility wasn't technically open yet. It had been Yohio's pet project for the last couple years now, and wasn't set to start taking patients for another year or two while he worked on hiring staff. He had spent the last year trying to convince me to give up my position at the hospital and come work as his chief of staff. I hadn't given him an answer yet. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if this suggestion of his was a way to push me into accepting the position. I could vaguely hear Rin and Len excitedly whispering to each other in the back seat of my car. I caught a few phrases that had compared the idea of staying here to staying at a fancy hotel on a school trip. I chuckled to myself at the innocence of such a notion. For a moment, looking at their faces, I could almost forget what it was that brought us here.
The parking lot's so empty!
I looked up at the rearview mirror to see her nearly pressing her face against the window.
Is nobody else staying here?
Not right now, Rin, no. My colleague who's meeting us here is bringing 3 of his patients who are experiencing something similar to what you 2 and Haku have been seeing. Haku may join us in the future, but for now it'll just be you 5 under mine and Dr. Hiroyuki's supervision. I had told the 2 of them a little bit of what I'd planned before I'd tried to convince their mother to let them come with me. It saved me having to convince the 2 of them as well.
Who are these 3 others? Do they go to our school?
The excitement of the new location seemed to have ebbed away. The face that stared at me in the mirror was serious. He seemed on edge. No, they live in an entirely different city, actually. Their names are Miku, Kaito, and Mako. You'll meet them momentarily. They should already be inside. I tried to reassure them with a smile, but I don't think it quite worked. I'd barely put the car in park before Rin was jumping out the back seat and into the parking lot. Once I'd turned off the ignition, I popped the trunk and climbed out of the car. Taking a moment to stretch out the kinks I'd developed in my joints and back over the 2-hour drive, I watched as Len helped his sister lift their luggage out of the trunk. Now, I expect the 2 of you to be on your best behavior while you're staying here. Your mother isn't here, so that means Dr. Hiroyuki and I are in charge. I don't expect you 2 to go picking fights or anything extreme like that, but I do need to impress upon you that I will not tolerate disrespect toward myself, my colleague, or the other patients. You don't need to be friends, but while you're living here for the next few weeks, I expect you to behave as if you're all responsible adults. Is that understood? The twins seemed surprised at my authoritative tone, but they answered positively. With all that said, I walked over to help Rin with her suitcase and led the 2 inside. The main lobby was moderately sized, though the room was mostly taken up by the large desk. There was a small section of plush chairs meant to be used as a waiting area, a few empty planters, and a vending machine, also empty. While I knew that there would be no staff present during our stay, the emptiness of the room was a little unsettling. I half expected to hear a radio playing or a television set to the local news station, but instead we were met by an almost eerie silence. Shaking off my initial discomfort, I led Rin and Len through the lobby into a large room filled with tables, chairs, and the odd couch. The large television set in one corner of the room led me to suspect that this was meant to be the common area. Waiting on one of the couches were 3 teenagers, a boy and 2 girls, and Yohio. I left Rin's suitcase by one of the tables and walked over to greet my friend and colleague. The twins followed slowly behind me.
There you are. I was starting to think you wouldn't show, Kyo.
Yohio walked toward me, holding up his arms as if he meant to hug me. He'd always been an affectionate friend. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have accepted the hug with a smile, but because I wanted to keep this as professional as possible, I caught his hand with one of mine and shook it. Did I keep you waiting long? I apologize. Traffic was terrible trying to get out of the city. Are these your patients? I motioned to the group sitting on the couch behind him.
Yep, these are the 3 I was telling you about. Come on, kids. Come say hi.
Yohio called over his shoulder at the 3. The boy and the older girl seemed rather reluctant to get up. It wasn't until the younger girl cheerfully headed in our direction that the older 2 followed.
Kyo, this is Miku Hatsune, and these 2 are Kaito Shion and Meiko Sakine. I already told you a bit about why they were brought to me for therapy, so I won't go into the details.
It's a pleasure to meet you 3. I turned and motioned for Rin and Len to join us. Rin shyly walked up beside me. Len was slow to join us as well, though I assumed not for the same shyness as his sister. He was staring at Miku with a surprised expression. I took another look at her myself and started to understand why. She matched his description of McKenna to a T. This is Rin and Len Kagamine.
Well then, let's get set up for our first session, shall we?
Already? Rin, Len, and I have been on the road for a while, Yohio. I'm sure they're hungry. I know I am. I didn't want to admit that I was starting to feel a little nervous about this whole endeavor. We were already here, so there was no backing out now, but I couldn't help feeling apprehensive.
Fair point. Alright, well, I did spend the last week making sure we had enough food. I've already shown my kids where the kitchen is. You and I can start setting up while the kids fix up some lunch and get to know each other a little. Sound good?
Yohio looked around at all the kids as he made his suggestion. They seemed a little surprised, but quietly agreed.
Great! We'll be using one of the larger rooms for the session, Kia. It's this way.
I'd been nervous about this whole idea since Dr. Hiyama suggested it a few days ago. The idea of having a session with 3 other kids that Rin and I didn't know made me a little uneasy. I thought I'd be more comfortable with it, considering how the session with Haku had gone. However, the moment I set my eyes on the girl the other doctor introduced as Miku, I found my heart skipping a beat, and my throat going dry. She was McKenna. She looked a little different, and her hair was a little longer, but that was definitely her. I'd barely registered what the doctors were talking about as my eyes met Miku's. She seemed surprised by me as well, but she offered me a smile and a wave. I found myself waving back. That was when Rin elbowed me in the side and grinned at me. I answered by rolling my eyes. As the doctors walked away to go set up, I looked over at the other 3, unsure of what to say or do. It was Miku who ended up breaking the silence.
So, I can cook a little bit, but I think Dr. Hiroyuki wants to get started as soon as possible. We should probably make sandwiches or something so that it's ready fast.
Whatever you do, keep Rin out of the kitchen. She's a terrible cook. Rin pouted and crossed her arms.
Hey!
I'm decent at cooking as long as it's simple things.
I'm not gonna be much help. I live on my own and I work a lot, so I mostly eat anything I can make in the microwave or get at the convenience store.
That's okay. I know Meiko can cook, so if you and Rin help by cleaning up, we can make this go really fast.
Sounds good to me.
Miku started walking toward the kitchen and the rest of us followed. Rin started grilling Kaito and Meiko about their hobbies and the things they liked. I could already see the stars in her eyes when she looked at Kaito. He was, without a doubt, Prince Caden, and the thought of what that crush could lead to unsettled me. Trying to push the thought from my mind, I focused on Miku. Are you in high school, Miku? I struggled to find something to start a conversation with.
Yep, I'm a second year. Meiko and Kaito are both third years. What about you and Rin?
Third year of middle school.
You'll be taking entrance exams in a little while then, huh? This whole ordeal can't be making it easy to study. When all this is over, if you need help, let me know. I'll help you however I can.
Stop it. Stop being so friendly. You should hate me for what I did to you. Don't you remember?
Len?
She waved her hand in front of my face, and I could see the worry on hers. Sorry, just worried about exams, like you said. Thank you. I'd appreciate the help. I get decent enough grades, but I'm worried the stress will get to me. The kitchen was smaller than I expected, but it was still rather impressive compared to the one at home. It looked like it belonged in a large house, not in a care center like this one. I had expected something like what you'd find in the back of a school cafeteria, all steel cabinets and counters. The appliances were steel, but everything else was wood and granite. There was a small area for eating on the other side of one of the counters, no doubt meant for staff. An archway on the other side led out to a larger room that had to have been the dining room, the way it was set up with multiple tables.
The kitchen and dining area are kind of small for a place like this, don't you think?
Meiko walked across the room to peer out at the dining area.
They probably don't expect to have a huge number of patients. It's probably one of those facilities where they keep it to a certain number, so the patients get the kind of focused attention they need. It's not a hospital, after all.
Kaito sat himself down at the table inside the kitchen. Rin sat across from him. There wasn't much the two of them could do until we needed something cleaned after all.
Okay, let's divide the work.
Miku clapped her hands together and began assigning Meiko and I tasks. Halfway through, once everything was ready to be assembled on plates, Kaito and Rin got started cleaning what we'd used to prepare everything. It didn't take long for all of us to be seated at the dining room. Once Kaito had fetched the doctors, we were settled in to eat. Lunch was a rather quiet affair. With the doctors there, it was hard for any of us to feel comfortable talking about normal things. That didn't stop Miku from trying, though. She managed to pull Rin and the others into a conversation about clubs. I stayed silent for the most part, only answering when spoken to directly. The doctors seemed to be focused on their own conversation. For the few moments I paid attention, they seemed to be discussing another patient. Deciding not to be rude, I turned my attention back to my sister and the others. When everyone was done eating, Rin and Kaito started collecting the dishes to go clean up. Due to the fact the kitchen was equipped with its own industrial-sized dishwasher, it didn't take long. I certainly felt better after getting something in my stomach. I'd even started to relax, continuing the conversation about entrance exams.
Please, don't remind me.
Rin and Kaito walked back into the dining room with us.
I just want to get it over with, get into a decent high school, and forget all about it.
So does that mean we're going to different schools? She pouted at me and I laughed. It felt nice being able to joke with her again after staying in the hospital for so long.
Alright, kids. We ready to begin?
Dr. Hiroyuki's voice broke through the conversation and we all went quiet, casting looks around to each other nervously.
You don't have to worry. This won't be any different than your regular sessions. There will just be more of you in the room.
Come on, let's get to work. Afterwards, I'll set up my Switch for you all to play on the big TV in the common room. Okay?
That seemed to brighten up Rin's and Kaito's faces. We all got up and followed the doctors out of the dining hall. They led us past the common room and into one of the larger treatment rooms. There, multiple beds had been set up for each of us.
Alright, kids. Each of you grab a bed. Kyo is going to be leading today's session.
Dr. Hiroyuki directed us each to a bed and waited until we were all comfortable. I laid there while I waited for the others, nervous about what was to come. Would I be forced to relive what happened to McKenna again? I hadn't had the dream since that session alone with Rin. What more was there after the last session? I heard the click of what I assumed was a tape recorder, and I closed my eyes.
All right. I'd like you all to focus on my voice.
the line! Don't let any of those bastards through! We'd been at this for hours. The enemy came in waves. As soon as we cut one down, another sprang up in its place. When Sir Roland chose me to be his squire, I never expected that this would be where fate would lead me. I'd always pictured knights to be glorious heroes who protected the innocent and rescued princesses from dragons. I'd been ecstatic when I'd been given my own command. I hadn't been ready for the reality of what awaited me. What had really only been a few hours of combat seemed to drag on for days. I watched in horror as the men who entrusted me to lead them to victory died around me. Why had Sir Roland entrusted me with this? I wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility. It took all my strength not to cry out in frustration when the next wave came. Come on! Close ranks! Show some courage! I tried desperately to put on a brave face. I had to show the men that there was nothing to fear. They stood with me only until the enemy drew closer. I heard one shouting to the others to run for their lives, that there was no chance of survival. Anyone who flees will die by my hand! You have your orders! Stand your ground! It was cruel, but I had to be tough in order to get them back in line. Sir Roland trusted me to lead. I had to show them that I was capable. Otherwise, I'd never be a knight. Did I even still want to be? Did chivalry and honor really exist in the path I had chosen? I wanted to go home. I wanted to see my parents again. I wanted to see my sister again. I wanted to live in peace where I could be happy. I wanted to leave this place and never return. The line broke when the enemy's blades met ours. The few left in my battalion died around me, screaming in agony. I'd barely had time to react when a sword came down at my head. I lifted mine to meet it. Too slow. I hit my knees as the enemy soldier pulled his blade from my shoulder. I'd expected him to remove my head with the next blow, but he just left me there. They'd broken past us. Now Sir Roland was all that stood between them and the innocent lives we'd been protecting. I fell face first into the dirt, praying that my last moments wouldn't be painful, and that Sir Roland would be all right. As I closed my eyes, I could hear something. A voice. I knew then that I must really be losing it as I lay there dying. It sounded like a child, but somehow it was familiar.
Remember me, and I'll grant your wish. Hey lady, are you okay?
I opened my eyes and stared up. That's strange. I remembered falling on my stomach. Wait, my shoulder! I sat up, almost too quickly. The world spun for a moment as I tried to get my bearings. My hands flew to my shoulder, but my clothes were clean? My hands should have been covered in blood when I looked down at them. But they were fine. I was fine. Where am I?
Don't you remember? This is your dream, after all.
The voice that responded to me. It was the one that I heard when I passed out. I looked around a moment. I was no longer in the field where we'd been fighting. I was on a road in the middle of a town. That couldn't be right, though. The last thing I remembered was being struck down. I should be dead. I finally let my eyes settle on the source of the voice. I gasped and stared at the being before me. A white rabbit with a red scarf. Where am I?
Why, Wonderland, of course. You used to dream of this place so often as a child, but then you stopped. You forgot us. You forgot me, Alice.
In that last sentence, its voice changed. There was that underlying menace there. It frightened me. I did, however, remember this dream. As a child, I grew up on the stories of Wonderland and the girl who went through the looking glass. I often dreamed of what Wonderland would look like. What it would be like to live there with a Cheshire cat and the White Rabbit. My name isn't Alice.
Of course it is. Everyone who comes here is Alice. Did you really think I'd forget your name, silly girl?
But I died.
Yes. Yes, you did. In your final moments, though, you made a deal with me. You wanted to leave that place and live somewhere in peace. So I brought you here. We can play and sing and dance and have fun, Alice! After all, Wonderland is just for you.
Stop calling me Alice. I climbed to my feet. I wanted to go home. Not here. I wanted to see my sister, my parents, Sir Roland. I have to go back. The rabbit shook its head.
You can't go back, Alice. This is your dream. You belong here.
Stop it! Stop calling me Alice! I covered my ears. Just leave me alone! If you can't send me home, leave me alone!
Fine, but I'll see you again soon, Alice.
I turned around to yell at it, but it was gone. I suddenly wasn't alone anymore. There were people on the street, going about their day-to-day. Some were staring at me. I stood there, looking around at them. I didn't know these people, or this town. I just wanted to go home. This wasn't what I wanted.
Miss, are you okay?
A voice broke me from my stupor. That of a young girl. I stared at her for a moment. What was the rabbit had said? This was a dream, right? This was my dream. I had created this world, right? I started to laugh. That was it. That was the answer. In this dream, I was Alice. I had created this wonderland before me. There was only one way out. I had to destroy this world of my creation. If I destroyed it, I could go home. If there was no life here, nothing we're staying for, then I'd wake up, right? That had to be it. I glared at the young girl and drew my sword.
Miss?
She screamed as I brought my sword down upon her. One by one, I killed each and every person I could reach. Some of them ran. They weren't very fast. Through the whole ordeal, I laughed. I laughed and I laughed. Running only put off the inevitable. They were all meant to die so I could go home. Every one of them. I bore down upon a man with blue hair and lifted my sword, ready to kill him as well.
Stop that.
And everything went black. I was alone again. There was nothing around me. Not even the town I'd been trying to destroy. What? What have you done? I looked around me for that damned rabbit, but I couldn't see anything in that damned blackness.
I really hoped you would be the one.
I tried to follow the voice, but something hard and metal stopped me in my tracks. What? What is this?
You're nothing but a failed Alice. I have no use for failures. You could stay here where you won't cause any trouble.
Let me out of here! It didn't answer. It just disappeared into the trees. Come back! Come back!
When the chaos began, I had ducked into a back alley, away from the large crowd of people who had gone running from the town square. I lifted both of my hands to my mouth to cover the heavy breaths that racked my chest. Where had that woman come from? I'd been coming to the square every day for weeks now to perform, and I had never seen her before. Weapons weren't permitted in the square. In fact, I didn't think weapons were permitted within the town at all. I backed further into the alley and ducked behind the corner of one of the buildings as the woman walked past. Oh gods, please don't let her see me. Unfortunately, my prayers went unanswered. She turned toward me and started moving down the alleyway. I pressed my back against the wall, hoping beyond hope that she wouldn't come any closer. I tried desperately to still my ragged breaths, to no avail.
With a laugh that sent chills down my spine, she swung her sword. I barely managed to duck in time. Her sword connected with the wall, filling the air with a dull ringing. I scrambled past her and took off further down the alley. I couldn't remember if this alley led out onto another street or if it was a dead end. Unfortunately, the answer hit me smack in the face. Literally. I ran right into the back wall and stumbled backwards, landing on the ground.
Come back. If I don't destroy you, I can't go back home. I have to leave this world.
I could hear her footsteps echoing off the walls of the buildings around us. The fear was taking over at this point. If I tried to slip past her again, she'd cut me down. I could try to scale the wall, but I wasn't very athletic, and I couldn't see anything that might serve as a foothold. I turned just as she reached me, and stared up into the face of a maniac.
I'll kill you!
She lifted her sword and...
Stop that.
she was gone. It was as if she never existed in the first place. I struggled to my feet, painfully aware at how cold I felt. She had been there, right? I hadn't just imagined it? I replayed those last moments in my head over and over for the next few minutes as I tried to come to terms with what I had just seen. After she screamed, there was another voice, right? It had sounded like a child. Not only that, it sounded familiar. I didn't want to stay in that dreadful place any longer. I turned around and made my way back out of the alley. I had expected to see bodies and blood everywhere, left behind in the murderous rampage of that woman. Instead, the square was bustling like always. There were no bodies to be found, and everyone was acting normally, as if it had never happened. I nearly jumped out of my skin when the bell in the clock tower began to chime. I stared up at it, barely able to see it in the distance. If it weren't for the tolling of the bell, I never would have known exactly what time it was. I looked back at the people in the square. Where had all the bodies gone? How could they act like none of that had happened? A small crowd had begun to form around a makeshift platform in the square. That's right. Around this time every day, I would stand upon that platform and sing until dusk. People would cheer and leave me money and other gifts. It was the life I had dreamed of. People fawning over me just because of my voice. I stumbled over to them and placed my hand on the shoulder of a tall man. He stared down at me, no doubt surprised by my disheveled look.
Are you alright?
Where did all the bodies go? Where did the woman go? The one with the sword?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
He stepped away from me, leading what I assumed to be his family away.
Hey, mister, are you going to sing?
The crowd's voices joined together as they begged me. Right. I have a job to do. How else am I going to pay for my supper? I stepped onto the stage and straightened my jacket as best as I could. I relaxed my shoulders and stretched out my arms. When I began to sing, I surprised even myself with how shaky and uneven my voice sounded. I couldn't get it to carry the way I used to. The first Alice was a vengeful woman with a blade. None who lived in Wonderland dared stand in her way.
Huh? Sing louder, mister.
My eyes searched their faces, but everything seemed blurry, as if my eyes couldn't focus on anything. The crowd drew closer toward me, yelling at me to sing louder, demanding I sing like I had yesterday. I tried again. Leaving naught behind her but a trail so drenched in red. My eyes darted back to the alleyway. There, standing behind the crowd, unnoticed by all who passed, was a white rabbit. Around its neck was a little red scarf. It stared at me, watching. It almost looked like it was evaluating me.
Mama, I don't like this song.
My eyes tore away from the rabbit and landed on the boy who spoke. I grinned at him as I continued the song. Careful not to follow her, or you may wind up dead. I didn't know what I found funnier, the look of complete horror on the boy's face, or the way his mother led him away by his shoulders.
Oh no.
I stopped laughing immediately and turned around. I knew that voice. I'd heard it when the woman with the sword disappeared. The rabbit had moved. It now stood behind me.
It looks like this Alice is broken too.
Who are you? Something about this talking rabbit terrified me. I found myself unable to look directly into its eyes for very long.
Who am I? I suppose it has been a rather long time since we last met, but I didn't think you'd forget me, Alice.
Alice? I think you've got the wrong person, Rabbit.
Who is he talking to?
Do you think he's cracked?
Let's go.
I looked back at the crowd. They were starting to disperse. I gazed around at all of the faces that were still on me. None of them were looking at the rabbit at all. Can't you see it? A rabbit! Right there! It's talking to me! Some people laughed. Others looked at me with pity. The crowd was practically gone now. I could feel my breathing becoming steadily heavier as I looked back at the rabbit. Why did it look so familiar? Why did it sound so familiar? Where had I seen it before? Who was Alice? As I rolled these thoughts and questions around in my mind, images began to flash across my thoughts. A dressing room. An opera. A man with purple hair. A gun. Pointed at me. And a white rabbit. The very same rabbit that stood in front of me now.
Do you remember me now? We made a deal. As long as you always remember me, I'd save you from the brink of death. But you forgot me, Alice. Now where does that leave you?
I clapped my hands over my ears, trying to drown out the laughter. Alice? Who was Alice? Was it me? Was I Alice? I couldn't be. Right? An image flashed across my mind again. A woman with a sword chasing down the citizens of Wonderland, killing them in cold blood. She kept muttering something to herself. I could barely hear it over the screams, but when she was coming toward me in the alley, I'd been able to hear it.
Alice! Destroy this world! Alice!
Was she like me? Had she come here to escape death? Had this world driven her mad? Why had she started killing everyone? I looked back at the rabbit, who had been silently watching me all this time. What happened to that girl?
She was trying to leave. She was trying to forget me. But I couldn't let that happen. Everyone dreams of Wonderland at least once in their life. So as long as you remember me, I'll always be here.
Why? Why are you telling me this? I was surprised it had even given me a straight answer.
Because, silly Alice, just like everyone else, you'll forget.
I had to get out. I had to leave Wonderland. Maybe that girl had the right idea. Destroying this world was the only way to get out. But killing the citizens wasn't the answer, no. My eyes darted around, trying to look past the white shape that haunted my vision. There, on the edge of the platform, something metallic. I scrambled over to it and picked it up. It was heavy in my hands. The second Alice was a kind and gentle, caring man. Why was I singing right now? I knew what I had to do. Why couldn't I just get it over with? And every day he sang his songs
to the folks in Wonderland. In the corner of my eye, I could see a new crowd of people gathering.
Sir, are you alright?
A hand on my shoulder. I turned to face the girl. She screamed. He spent his days entertaining all the girls and boys, weaving songs and tales of madness simply with his voice. This Alice, telling tales as often as he could, was shot by a madman! The realization of what the metal object in my hand was hit me like a ton of bricks. I lifted the object to my head. Who silenced him for good?
You're sure? The girl who stood before me was one of my ladies-in-waiting. The message she had brought me came straight from the town. In the course of a single afternoon, 2 people had gone mad. The first, a woman who had murdered a dozen people with a sword, had completely disappeared. No one could find her. The second, a singer who often entertained the children in town, had shot himself.
The townspeople are calling it the Alice sickness. The 2 who went mad were heard muttering things like Alice and destroy.
A sickness. The very thought of such an ailment spreading through the kingdom terrified me. I tried my best to keep from shaking. I couldn't let any of my ladies-in-waiting see me so frightened.
The chances of it reaching the castle are slim, my dearest queen. It's impossible for you to develop...
Of course it is. There's no way I could die from something like that. I stood and began pacing the floor of my chamber. I had gone to serious lengths to preserve my health. 6 servants and nobles were quarantined, kept far from my presence until they recovered. Potions and ointments were used daily to preserve my youth and beauty. After all, who could love an old and ugly queen? Still, I stopped pacing in front of the floor-length mirror in my chamber. One day I will die. One day I'll grow old and frail and the people will replace me. I stared at my face in the mirror, kept youthful and pretty by makeup alone. If only I could obtain a younger body so that I...
That selfish thinking is exactly what might make you sick, Your Majesty.
I knew the voice that spoke all too well. It often returned to remind me of the deal we'd struck years ago. I turned to face the source of the childlike voice. I suspected the rabbit before me was no child at all.
Your Majesty?
Leave me. I said leave me! The rabbit didn't speak again until they'd left the room.
Are you going to tell me that you want to leave this world too?
I glared at the creature. A cruel reminder that I had once been something far less than what I was now. You again! I haven't forgotten you, so you have no need to be here! I'll never go back. I'll never be a singer in that circus again. Everyone was always pointing and laughing. All I did was sing and sing. No one saw me for who I really am. No one loved me. I paced as I spoke, glaring at the rabbit every now and then for emphasis as I shook the memories of the life I escaped from my mind. But here, everyone loves me for who I am. They made me their queen and they all adore me.
Do they though? Do people really love you for you? After all,
Shut up! Shut up! I fought desperately to force back the tears that threatened to spill from my eyes. They do. I turned back toward the mirror, straightening my dress and fixing my hair. Now leave me. The rabbit didn't move. It sat there, staring at me. Get out of here! Go away!
Shut up? Go away? Is that how you treat your savior, you ungrateful wretch?
I stared in surprise. In all my time here, the rabbit had never spoken to me so angrily. The ice in its voice was like a venom that threatened to seep into my very being.
Oh, that's right. You love to sing, don't you? Are you sure you don't want to be a diva again? Very well then, as you wish, Your Majesty.
It lifted its arm and pointed at me. For a moment, we both stood still. The room was silent, and I could feel a coldness washing over me. A tickle began in the back of my throat. I coughed to clear it away, but that only seemed to make it worse. I lifted my hands to my throat, the realization of what had happened dawning on me, shaking me to my core. What did you do? My voice was hoarse and feeble, as if I'd come down with a terrible cold.
I gave you what you wanted, Alice. I took away the very thing you once loved, so that no one can make a diva of you again. Your people will love you for your beauty and your kindness, maybe. But they will certainly not love you for the loss of your beautiful voice. I think you're much better this way. Your voice is so ugly now. You sound like an old lady. Remember, Alice, you and the rest may have created this world, but it belongs to me.
Come back! I sunk to my knees. Give me back my voice! Please! As the rabbit disappeared into the darkness, one of my ladies came back into the room. She dropped the tray of tea she'd been carrying to the floor and rushed over to me.
Your Majesty! Your Majesty, what's wrong?
She tried to lift me back to my feet. Come back! Give me back my voice!
Do you remember that dream we used to have when we were really little?
I stared at my brother, a little surprised. As twins, we often had similar dreams, but there was only one I could remember that was exactly the same. It was as if the experience had been real, and we had both been wide awake the whole time. I set down the half-empty cup of tea I've been drinking from and smiled at him. You mean that one about the white rabbit? I remember. We played together, sing and dance. He was always really sad right before we wake up. I wonder why.
Probably because we were going away.
Why did you suddenly bring that up, though? I tilted my head at him. He was sitting with his hands folded in front of his face, elbows on the table, slightly hunched over so that the blue roses in the center slightly obscured his face.
Doesn't this place remind you of that dream? The flowers were singing back there. And now we're having tea with a bunch of their dead friends decorating the table. This place is weird.
He gestured about us as he spoke. I suppose it is a bit like it. Still, we're not dreaming, right? This place is real. I reached for one of the tarts sitting by the tea kettle. I took a bite from it, savoring the flavor as my twin stared at the flowers, deep in thought. He'd always been a worrywart. I wasn't surprised that he didn't like that I was eating and drinking without worry. I guess a table with tea and treats sitting unoccupied in the middle of the woods did seem a little suspicious.
It seems to be real. I don't remember falling asleep. We went through that green door back there and wound up here.
He stopped, reaching out towards the plate of treats.
Hey, what's that?
His fingers wrapped around the edge of what I thought had been a napkin. Instead, it was an envelope. He pulled it from beneath the sweets, sending one or two tumbling off the plate. A letter? Who's it addressed to? My brother turned the letter over to read the writing on the front.
To whoever finds this, please open.
Well, what are you waiting for? Open it! I watched as he hesitantly tore into the envelope, removing from it a folded piece of paper. He carefully unfolded it, a card falling from it to the table. As he read the letter, I reached out to pick up the card, examining it. The back wasn't very intricate. It was a harlequin pattern of teal and gray. The front showed a large yellow heart and two small A's in the corners. A playing card? What's the letter say?
To the lucky person who finds this letter, you are cordially invited to visit the castle of Her Majesty, the Queen of Wonderland. Follow the red path through the forest, and you will find me at its end. By my hand, the Queen of Wonderland.
Wow! Did you hear that? We get to meet the Queen! Come on, let's go! I jumped to my feet, ready to leave right away.
Hold on! We don't know that the Queen actually wrote this. It could be a prank. Or it could even be a trap.
We'll never know unless we go. Come on, please! I put on my best puppy dog eyes and pouted my bottom lip out at my brother. He sighed at me and nodded.
Fine. But at the first sign of trouble, we're leaving. Agreed?
Agreed! The word was barely out of my mouth before I'd taken off at a run. My brother called after me a few times, telling me to wait, before he sprinted to catch up with me. We were pretty quiet for most of the walk. I was too excited about the prospect of meeting the Queen to really focus on anything else. I babbled on about how cool it was going to be and how jealous we were going to make other people for a while. It wasn't until I noticed something off in the distance that I stopped. Hey, what's that? I pointed at the metal-looking object catching the midday sun.
I don't know. But we should probably ignore it.
Hold on, can you hear that? Please come back. We were both quiet for a moment. It was hard to hear at first, but there was a distant sound of a girl crying. Focusing on the object, I could just make out what seemed to be the bars of a cage.
I really think we should leave that alone.
He caught me by the shoulders and steered me down the road. The look on his face was enough to tell me how worried he was, so I followed his instruction and continued down the path. We were quiet the rest of the way to the castle. I was worried egging my brother on would just cause him to chicken out. He, on the other hand, looked pensive and worried already. I'm sure he didn't like the idea of visiting the castle. After all, we were new to the region, and I'm sure the Queen didn't intend for us to be the ones to find the letter. Still, it hadn't really been addressed to a specific person, just the person who happened to find it. Which was us. So, it had to be okay, right? There were no guards to stop us as we walked right up to the doors of the castle. That probably should have been a red flag, and I knew my brother was definitely worried, but I pressed on. There was no drawbridge or portcullis to keep us out, just a set of large wooden doors. I lifted a hand and knocked. I barely put my arm back down at my side when the door slowly opened.
Ah, welcome! Her Majesty, our dearest Queen, has been expecting you. Please, come inside. I'll escort you.
It was a woman who greeted us, with long hair. She must have been a maid or an attendant to the Queen. We followed her inside, and the large doors slammed closed behind us. I jumped near out of my skin, trying to brush it off as just a gust of wind. I began excitedly talking with our escort. I was so surprised when we found that letter. We were just sitting down for tea when my brother found it under the pile of sweets.
The Queen was hoping it would be a pair of cute children like yourselves who would find the letter. You see, she's been awfully under the weather lately. Nothing any of her ladies do seem to be able to do anything to lift her spirits. I'm sure if you and your brother sing for Her Majesty, she'll find her joy again.
My brother and I love to sing. We'd be more than happy to sing for Her Majesty, right? I spun around walking backwards as I looked at my brother. He was pale and looked frightened. Worried, I reached out to take his hand. What's the matter?
Nothing.
He pulled his hand away. It surprised me to say the least. I turned back around just as we reached the door to the Queen's chambers. The woman knocked, opened the door, and motioned us inside. We stepped inside and I looked around a moment. The room was dark. There was a group of ladies seated on cushions in the corner. The door slammed closed as the woman who guided us in went to join the other ladies.
Welcome!
There, on the opposite side of the room, the queen sat with a book on her lap. She closed the book and stood, waving us closer. I reached for my brother's hand, clinging to it as we stepped closer. As we approached the queen, she reached out with a hand and stroked my face.
What beautiful skin you have!
The session had left us all a little shaken. None of the teens were willing to talk afterward, and I couldn't blame them. I hadn't been expecting a whole new story when we'd settled in for the session, and I was a little unsettled by how dark this new world we'd been given a glimpse into seemed. Len and the others had all gone off to do their own thing. Yohio and I had decided it was best to leave them alone, to let them process all we had seen. Perhaps over time we could come to an understanding as to what exactly we had been witnessing. It had been the first time I had seen more than one person leading the story, as it were. Considering the gruesome fate that had befallen all of them in this particular vision, I guess it shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did. Yohio and I were in the kitchen, giving the teens their space as he and I went over the session again and all of the details that had been given to us. I watched as he poured himself a glass of whiskey. When he offered me one, I declined. I still had one more patient to see today, and didn't need any alcohol in my system before I'd seen her.
That was intense.
It was. It, didn't give us any answers, either. Just more questions. This can't be the continuation of the lives of McKenna and Catherine. Arlen was dead by that point, so what was this? Another life? I tried desperately to wrap my head around it.
Maybe so. What's to say there's not a ton of lives these kids are being forced to relive during these sessions? It's fascinating.
Fascinating? That was downright terrifying, Yohio. We're supposed to be helping these kids, not making them experience more trauma.
I know. I just can't help but be fascinated by it. All these kids, some having never met before, with these shared visions, pasts? Are we really experiencing a glimpse into past lives? It's incredible.
He took a big gulp of his whiskey as he flopped down into the seat across the table from me.
We've got to get to the bottom of this. And the only way to do that is through another session.
I don't know. You saw their faces after we brought them out of it. They were scared. What if the next... for now, I guess we can call them memories. What if the next memory is something even worse?
Then we'll help them through it. That's what we're here for, after all.
I hope you're right. I should go. I'll be back later this evening. I have another patient I need to see today. I started to get up and gather my things.
I thought you canceled everything else to focus on this.
This is different.
Ah, Sonika's kid?
Yeah. I'll be back in a few hours. And what happened after the girl and boy disappeared behind the door, Yuki? I watched the 10-year-old in front of me play with the stuffed rabbit in her lap. She didn't answer right away, choosing instead to reach out for the teacup on the table in front of her and pretend to help the rabbit drink. I took a moment to look around the bedroom. The last time I had been here had been Yuki's 9th birthday party. It was hard to believe it had been a year since the accident. This house had once belonged to another former classmate of mine. Yohio hadn't been as close to her as I had been, but he still took the news hard. Sonika had been the top student in our year. Everyone wanted to be her friend, but she had chosen to hang out with me and Yohio. I admit there was a time when I even considered asking her out. In the end, I decided against it, and she had gone on to marry Leon. He and I had become pretty decent friends. When their daughter Yuki had been born, they'd asked me to be her godfather. Last year, They were killed in a terrible car wreck that left Yuki paralyzed from the waist down. I tried to do all I could for Yuki while she was in the hospital. She was eventually taken in by her uncle Gakupo and his girlfriend. As her godfather, I checked in on her now and again to make sure she was doing all right, and to make sure Gakupo and Gumi didn't need any help with anything. Last month, they'd asked me to start seeing her for regular therapy sessions after she started having horrible nightmares. At the start of this session, however, she had told me the nightmares had changed, and that she was having different, scarier dreams. Yuki?
They went away. The window got smaller, and I couldn't see much of the world outside anymore. When I asked the Shadow Man why, he said it was because I was being forgotten. He sounded angry.
Yuki looked up from her stuffed rabbit to meet my eyes.
Then I woke up.
I see. That certainly is a scary dream, Yuki, but you know it's just a dream, right? It can't hurt you. Now, what about your friend Fukase? Did he visit you this week? Did you two have fun together? I decided to change the subject to take her mind off the nightmare. Perhaps now that she had talked about it and gotten it out of her system, she might be able to forget about it. She launched into a story about what she and her friend had gotten up to that week. 20 minutes later, I was getting ready to go talk to her uncle when she began to sing. The words chilled me to the bone.
The first Alice was a vengeful woman with a blade, one who lived in Wonderland, destined in her way, leaving not behind her but a trail so drenched in red. Careful not to follow her, or you may wind up dead.
Yuki, where did you learn that song? Kaito had sung the song during today's session. It creeped the hell out of me, even more so now that I had heard my goddaughter singing it. She looked up at me with a bright smile.
I heard it in the dream. The boy with the blue hair was singing it.
I stared at her as she turned her wheelchair toward me, and then I looked down at the stuffed rabbit in her lap. It was white, with a red scarf. Too fixated on her own grief. For a moment, looking at their faces, I could almost forget what it was that brought us here.
Beginning recording in 3, 2... The parking... I didn't do her voice right. Hold on. Gotta get in my Rin voice. Is nobody else saying the Am I just being weird? Yes, I am.
Haku may join us in the future, but for now, I'll just be bleh.
Who are these three others? Motorcycle. They're motorcycle.
You don't need to be friends, but while you're living here for the next few weeks, I expect you to behave as if you're responsible adults. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have accepted the hug with a smile. That came out wrong, didn't it? Yohio called out, bleh. Don't want that lip smacks, do we? This is Rin and Len. Nihongo wa...
However, the moment I set my eyes on the girl the other doctor introduced as Miku, I found my heart skipping a beat and my throat growing dry. Going, not growing.
So, I can cook a little bit, but I think Dr. Hiroyuki wants to get started as soon as possible. We should probably make sandwiches or something so that it's really... I almost said really. I wanted to say really.
God damn it, Lynn, hey! I just put that air for the bloopers. I just wanted to, because I feel like that would be her at times when she's just fed up with Len.
That's okay. I know Miku can cook, so if you and Rin help by cleaning up, we can make this go really fast.
Yeah.
Not chipper enough for you?
Yeah.
You'll be taking entrance.
Hold the line! Don't let any of those bastards through. The T. Every time, the tea! Fuck! We'd been at this for hours. The enemy came in waves. As soon as we cut one done? What? Come on! Close ranks! So... They stood with me only until the enemy drew closer. Anyone who flees will buy... It was cruel, but it had to be tough in order to get them to get... The line broke when the enemies... Enemies? The line broke! Fuck! The world spun for a moment. I'm gonna redo that because... cat.
Why, Wonderland, of course. You used to dream about this place all along. Blah, 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 blah. Of course it is. Everyone who comes here is Alice. Did you really think I'd forget your name, silly girl? Oh my god, why do I keep doing the same goddamn laugh for every creepy child that I do? Curse typecasting. Okay. Of course it is. Everyone who... Oh my goodness. Everyone's messaging me on freaking Discord now. You're nothing but a failed Alice. I have no use for failures. You could stay here where you won't have any cinnamon roll.
When the chaos began, I had ducked into a back alley, away from the large crowd of people who had gone running from the town square.
Square! The town square!
As the woman walked past... P-A-S-T, past...
Hey, you proofread this, so you've only yourself to blame.
I told you about that one the first time we read it together.
Yes, but you still proofread this.
I changed that and saved it.
Apparently not.
Oh god. Oh god. Please. Please don't let her see me. Problem?
Please don't let her see me.
Please don't let her see me. Oh god, oh no. Oh damn it. Oh.
A little more whispery, so like...
I pressed my back against the wall, hoping beyond hope that she wouldn't come any closer. Sword of Omens, give me hope beyond hope!
God damn it!
She was gone. It would... I roleplayed those last...
That says replayed.
Yes, I roleplayed those last moments in my head over
Somebody
and over.
has D&D on the brain.
She was like, ah! And I was like, ee! And she was like, clang! And she was like, I'll kill you! And I was like, no! And then something was like, stop that! And I was like, huh? Oh man. Good RP session.
Mama, I don't like this song. I can go so high with my natural voice. I don't know if it works for a little boy, but it's gonna try. Mister, hello. Are you going to sing for us? Mama, I don't like the song.
The cloud drew.
The cloud! The cloud!
What?
I'm just picturing it's just a bunch of clouds with faces.
It's Mario.
It's 10 o'clock, we gotta get this done.
Leaving not behind her but a trail so drenched in red.
Okay, a little less in there. Red. That's literally what we did. Red.
Yes, I'm aware of what I did. Don't remind me.
Let's... Ooh, piece of candy. Whoops. Gotta try that again.
The townspeople are calling the...
I fought desperately to force back the tears. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You love to sing, don't you? Are you sure you don't want me to be a diva again? Wait, me be a diva? A white rabbit being a diva? Nope, that doesn't sound right. That'd be very amusing, though. I gave you what you wanted, Alice. I took away the very thing you once loved so much that no one would... I gave you what you wanted, Alice. I took away the very thing you once loved so that no one could make you a diva ever again. Why can't I get these words right? I can't do this creepy giggle because it turns out into a maniacal laugh. There's no good medium. Gah. I gave you what you wanted, Alice. I took away the very thing you once loved so that no one can make a diva of you again. Blah, 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 blah. You know, for someone who's working to be a speech pathologist, speech is something I do just excellent, if you ask me. I gave you what you wanted, Alice. I took away the very thing you once loved so that no one can make a diva you again. Beta Barty Burgie. I gave you what you wanted, Alice. I took away the very thing you once loved so that no one can make a diva you again. I can't talk!
Your Majesty! Your Majesty, what's wrong there?
I set down the half... He just... I reached for one of the tart city... I was too excited about the prospect close. I was too excited. I was too excited. There was no drawbridge or portcullis to keep us out. Fuck. Portcullis. Even though I know how to do that. There was no drawbridge or portcullis to keep us out. Portcullis. Like Cullen, but Cullis. Colon. There was no drawbridge or fuck. That. There was no drawbridge or portcullis. This word. I hate you so much. Portcullis. Okay.
The Queen was hoping that it would be
somewhere down this list is the next bit that I talk in. Words, stories, things, rabbits, wishes. I was a little unsettled by how dark this new world we'd been given a glimpse into seemed. Words. Words are hard. Why do you give me words to say?
That was intense. God damn, that was intense. Oh, that was so intense.
Oh my god, stop. I did not write Yohio Lloyd to be like that.
Intense.
Oh my god.
Wait, I want to see if I can get my microphone to vibrate with my voice. Intense.
You're not Kratos.
Intense. Only one may enter here.
God. Oh, if the Watchers didn't think you were weird before.
He took a big gulp. A culp. That's a measure of drink. She was eventually taken in by her uncle, Gakupo, and his... Gakupo? Really? Is that a name? Gakupo.
He sounded angry.
Really, Plane?
You gonna do this to me when I have not that much left at all? Go away. Shoo, shoo.
The first Alice was a vengeful woman with a plane. Plane, please go away. Why are you circling me? You've been circling over my house for quite a while. If you don't go away, I'll kill you with a smile.
Why are you above my house?
Hey guys, do you like our content? Do you want to support the show? Click the link in the description below to visit our donation page. All proceeds go towards new and better equipment and games you want to see us play. Everyone who donates will get a special shout out at the end of future videos, and we're currently working on setting up some special perks for you. If you don't want to donate, that's okay too. You can support us by subscribing and clicking that bell icon so you get notified whenever we put out a new video. A huge thank you to Kyle Sheridan for donating and helping to keep our show going. Thank you so much for checking out today's story. A huge thank you to my friends Izumi Yukimura, Ohime Kagami, Hana Uta, Sam Firewolf, Gen Dokashi, Mysterious Torua, Kiona Bashful Echo, Ryan Booth, Piper Jones, Mattingham, Cliche Gamer, Carson K, and Arlen Adams for helping me out today. Make sure to give them some love. Links in the description down below. And a huge thank you to all of the voice actors who took time out of their busy lives to help me out this year. Pastaween means so much to me, and it wouldn't be nearly as amazing as it is if it wasn't for all of the people who put in so much hard work to help me. I can't wait for next year. If you'd like to see yesterday's story, click that box on the left. Or if you'd like to see something a little different, click that box on the right to check out our latest Let's Voice Act series. Thanks for watching. Happy Pastaween. Stay creepy, everybody.